You know where I want to start, gentlemen? We're a little bit late on this, but Cam Newton basically fending off four people at once with his. People have been saying a wizard hat. I feel more like witch-esque, but I guess witches, wizards, all kind of the same.
Was the hair coming out of the center of the top of the hat? I didn't pay it that much mind, so I didn't look that closely. But that's what it looked like when I glimpsed at the video.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Dude, I mean, Cam Newton was like one of the athletes I really admired growing up. And seeing him in person, like on the 7-on-7 circuit, I guess like people on the circuit kind of view it as normal now, just because he's been running his own team for several years at this
Yeah, him
point.
and his dad.
Yeah, but he's literally at all these tournaments just like for the fun of it. And when you see him in person, like he looks different, man. He's like
He's monstrous.
yeah, he's like 6'5", 260. Like he's a monster of a human being.
If I recall correctly, he trained at IMG pre-draft, and I crossed paths with him there for whatever reason. I think I might have been down there for 7-on or visiting the school for prospects. And I just remember thinking, that dude looks like a defensive end.
A reminder, we say this occasionally on the show, that like the collective we as like fans who aren't there on the field running around don't have a great grasp of like what we're actually watching sometimes, the speed and strength and size of the human beings that we're watching. And this just further, exemplifies that, yeah, these are different human beings than the rest of us. Cam Newton fending off four people in a fight with ease, not losing his wizardry witchy hat. But I want to talk about, Chris, is you are a veteran of the 7-on-7 circuit. By the way, this is on the bench. I'm Brendan, Chris, Zach. Hello. You're a veteran of the 7-on-7 circuit. You've seen your share of fights, of scuffles. This is not abnormal. There's fights.
Debauchery in that setting is perfectly normal.
Because it's
fights,
hot,
words
right?
exchanged.
Yeah,
it's hot.
And sometimes theft, teams getting kicked out.
And Cam is Cam's one of the biggest.
He'll squawk.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest talkers when it comes to, chirping at the other side. So
I just think you have to be an idiot to try to throw hands on a former NFL player if you are not a former NFL player, or a select player thing like a UFC fighter.
A guy of his stature. It's not like some tiny running back. Like the dude's 6'5".
I can assure you that at least, I mean, I don't know how like quickly it escalated, but at least one or two of those guys had it in their mind before, like, oh, I bet you I could take Cam Newton.
I'm a firm believer in evaluation, and you need to evaluate that situation beforehand and realize you're probably going to get your ass kicked.
Buyer Sonone, Chris, if Cam Newton had Zach and I in a headlock, you would come over to help defend.
Hell no! I'd take video of it and laugh, and hey, maybe I'd become a internet superstar on the X. But no, I'm not.
No, you give it to Zach and I, because we have the X Blue, so we'd actually profit from it. Chris would do that. Chris would put the video up on his own X and not let us make any money while we get our asses kicked. The problem was whether Chris would help us or not. Buyer Sonone,
I would
Zach,
not.
we had our head in a
Sonone.
Yeah, hard to know. Okay. But Chris, what is the best, well, best being a relative term, the most memorable 7-on-7 fight that you've ever seen in person?
Truly, my most memorable 7-on-7 thing, and Wayne McGahee's going to listen to this and laugh because I'm pretty sure he was there. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who now has had a healthy NFL career, I believe instigated a fight between maybe Pro Impact and a South Florida team. I can't remember who. I believe it was at IMG. He wasn't on either team when he caused this. He was just squawking at one, and then another one showed up, and it turned into a thing. And those two teams got into it, and Chauncey just was like an onlooker. He is probably the greatest trash talker I've ever seen in person. Like when you see things about him in the NFL, like irritating other players and people basically thinking he needs to shut up and things like that, it's all true. Like he's phenomenal at it. It's very impressive. That's probably my most memorable thing. I mean, I remember instances of like buses being entered and items going missing, and that happening to teams and causing major issues at some tournaments. I was lucky. I was there for the early days of 7-on when it was select teams, like when it was really, really good teams, because it was one team for major areas of athletic talent, and everybody on that team would go on to play pretty high-end college football, and a lot of them would end up being pros. Now it's a little bit more slice and dice, where there's 15 teams for Miami and 5 teams for areas that can't support 5 teams. So it's just not the same. I'm not really a fan of it, and for a lot of the sideshow that goes on with it is why I'm not a fan of it.
Chris and I kind of came up covering the beginning of 7-on-7 stuff. That's how we got to know each other and whatnot. But that was 15 years ago. Zach, what about you? Do you have a good fight memory? Again, not good. That's not the right phrase for it.
Yeah.
Memorable.
Although Chauncey Johnson starting a fight between two teams that he was not involved with at all just by talking is actually that's good. It's good
Yeah,
material.
well, I had one where it wasn't a fight, but I guess the 7-on-7 organizers didn't rent out the fields for long enough. So they had to stop the tournament before the championship game so some like soccer team could come play on the field.
Was that in South Florida?
No, I don't think that was. I think it
Oh.
was somewhere else. Because I don't remember it being South Florida, but I don't know where exactly that was.
My favorite one was this weird random like Space Coast 7-on-7, but there were a few like handful of like really good Central Florida programs there, including at the time Dr. Phillips, which was like becoming a powerhouse. They had Nick Patty at quarterback, went to go to Boise State. I think that may have been like the Clinton Dix teams, or maybe right after, but like they had dudes on those teams, and they were like should have been like the front
Was
runner.
Matt on that team?
Matt.
Bills player now. Matt.
Oh, Milano.
Milano.
I think Milano may have been. It was around that exact time. It may have been a year after, but it was around that time. Yeah, I think Matt would have been there. So, anyways, Ken Griffey Jr. son
Trey
Griffey was on that team at a transfer there. So Ken Griffey was at this 7-on-7 tournament, and my colleague Chris Hayes and I were there talking with Ken Griffey Jr., which was awesome, right? You're just sitting there shooting the shit with Ken Griffey Jr., and all of a sudden, one coach starts yelling, and his Dr. Phillips playing, I can't remember who, starts yelling at someone. It escalates as these 7-on-7 tournaments do, and bench clearing, like brawl pretty much starts off. But somehow in the mix of this, a parent and the head coach of Dr. Phillips at the time, a Dr. Phillips parent, started getting into it with the head coach. The head coach may have dropped something that was a little inappropriate phrasing wise, and the head coach was fired in the next day or two. So yeah, that was and Ken Griffey Jr. just stood there watching it, by the way. He did not get involved with it, but that was kind of a surreal 7-on-7 moment. All right, let's get into the Florida State portion of this podcast. That was fun going down memory lane. So this is On the Bench. We are brought to you by Chattanooga Whiskey. Gentlemen, a little news. I am getting a bottle pretty soon in the mail of Chattanooga Whiskey's white port cask finished bourbon. Talked about it a little bit on the last podcast. It's out now. You can get it on sealbacks. If you're in the Chattanooga area, you can go ahead and get it at their experimental distillery on Market Street, which, by the way, like Chattanooga is just awesome city. A lot of cool stuff to do there. And like, yes, there's all the nature stuff you can do. You go hiking and rafting and all that cool stuff, but you can also go down Market Street and get great eats and go to the experimental distillery and do a tour. So if you're in the area, highly recommended. Like, I'm super excited about the white port cask finished bourbon. Basically, they implement like 3 different bourbons in there. It's got like a wheat mash bill, which Chris and I've tried their straight wheat mash bill, like cast strength version of it, and it's awesome. They go ahead and they put this in a white port cask finish, and they combine a couple other bourbons. It's toasted, it's roasted, and it's supposed to end up having like rich, fruity, aromatic, complex flavors and notes. Honey, vanilla, stone fruit are some of the tasting notes that they've sent me here, but I have to try it myself and let you guys know, and I'll give you some samples too. So Chattanooga Whiskey, thank you for their support. Their experimental line is out, and apparently it's getting really high reviews, so not surprising at all. All right, so the NFL Combine is here. We've talked a little bit about previewing some of the players that would be there. FSU has a dozen. That's good PR for FSU. No, it's even better when those players go there and just kick ass, and it's been awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty phenomenal watching that live as he crosses the finish line. Braden Fiske is who we're talking about. He just goes, oh, yeah. Knowing him, having spent a year around him, understanding one that he's pretty easy dude to like, but also he loves him some football, and he's a bit freaky athletically for a large human. Like, it all came together yesterday. It was pretty great. I don't know if you got to watch the NFL Total Access interview with him after the Combine wrapped up last evening.
I did. It was great.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's 100% him. Like when they're showing him with not Teandre Waverly,
Swift.
T Swift, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna do that to him," and it's him running with Mahomes.
Not DT Swift.
No, the NFL version of it. the actual good NFL version of it.
I thought you were going to say the actual good T Swift, and I was about to back off.
Mahomes is on there, and he's like, "Well, I'm gonna have to be chasing that guy next year." But yesterday was awesome. Like I thought, first held up just fine. I was surprised Fabo didn't.
Hang on. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Braden Fiske. So basically, this is going to be a rolling, several days of FSU players participating in the NFL scouting combine. First off, yesterday in the athletic testing were defensive linemen as well as linebackers. So that gets you Braden Fiske, Jared Verse, Tatum Bethune, Kalen DeLoach for Florida State.
And
Braden Fiske. Oh, and Fabian Lovett. See, thank you, Chris. Braden Fiske stole the show. Yeah. And when I say stole the show, nationally, like NFL.com has a story up now, like the guys who helped their stock the most. Braden Fiske leads the story.
Is Peyton Wilson on there too?
He has to be, right?
He was excellent. Big dude. That's NC State linebacker who won ACC Defensive Player of the Year.
He's not. Dallas Turner's on there.
He was also
6'2" and has like an 83-inch wingspan, which is crazy. But so Braden Fiske, for context, what he did, I got the numbers in front of me here. 40-yard dash, 4.78 seconds. That's at 292 pounds. A little like on the smaller side, but nothing like that's not crazy. The arm length is the one thing that is going to ding him a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
It's a little T-Rex.
But everything else goes really, really, really fast. And the film's obviously going to be great. But his 40-yard dash of 4.78 seconds is in the 98th percentile. His vertical jump of 33.5 inches, 95th percentile. Broad jump, 909. That is so 9 feet, 9 inches. No, wait, 9 feet. I don't know how the number. It's good. It's in the 97th percentile, closer to 98. And his shuttle drill, which I don't know if that was confirmed or not for sure, but 4.37 seconds.
It was.
It was okay. Yeah. So all this combined, there's a website that we'll follow. Clay and I are fans of it. It's the Relative Athletic Score, RAS. I always want to say Relative Athlete Score. 9.97 was his score. It's out of 10. Score, 0 to 10. And basically it's percentile based, right? So that means he is in the 99.7 percentile of defensive tackles. They've been doing this since 1987, or they've been tracking it with guys going back to 1987. I think there's been about 1,600 defensive tackles with times since guys who go to combines or pro days, and you get all this data. He is 6th all time.
So I had somebody who is a draft person, college person too, but not Florida State person, ask me like, how good is before yesterday? How good is Braden? And I'm like, he is drastically better than his stats will tell you he is. And his stats aren't bad. They're
stats are good. He was,
but they're not eye popping. They're not mind blowing stats. But like you put on film of him, and he's unbelievably good. Obviously, Florida, Louisville, down the stretch there, we saw it, especially with a guy basically playing on one good foot at the time because he kept wearing a boot to those games.
He had turf toe with his 2 best games this season.
But he was good all year. And the thing about him that I love is maybe more than anybody we covered last year on this football team, maybe Jordan Travis falls into this category too. Practice day to day, he was always really good. Like the consistency is throughout. And it's partly because he is athletically gifted, but he also just loves playing football. And he has an easygoing enough personality where I don't think bad things bring him down. And I don't think he ever gets too high. I think he's very consistent in the middle.
Did you expect him to be like this crazy off the charts with?
I didn't. I thought he'd be good. I thought he'd run a really good time. Brendan's going to bring up the fumble
generationally
story.
Good at something, like elite.
I mean, it's like we watch it. You guys watch this guy every day, right? Every practice.
Zach, once he did the jumping, the broad jump and vertical jump, and those were as good as they were, then I was like, oh yeah, because we knew he was going to do well in the 40 and the shuttle stuff. So then we started looking up like the RAS like compares like Geno Atkins was who came up right away for him, and that's who they ended up compared to NFL.com. I'll give myself a pat on the back for stumbling on that. But as soon as we saw the vertical stuff, like we're like, yes, like he's going to test well with everything else at this point. So
for big body dudes with the 40, it's all about that 10. One, I think NFL teams probably care more about the 10 than the 40, but an eye-popping 40 is still going to draw you attention. But the way he started that first attempt at the 40, it was like he's going to have one of those days. He's going to smoke Mike Norvell in this race, even though Mike's not out there running. He's still going to smoke him.
What do you think Mike's 40 time is?
Mike's got to be, he's got to be under 5 seconds, right?
On good hammies or bad hammies?
Mike in the spring and early in camp is very different than Mike at the end of the season. To be fair. But yeah, I think Mike Norvell's got wheels. I think that this was justifying that Mike still got a little bit of juice. Chris, do you remember the time Braden gave us a little bit of crap?
Yes,
For
about the
I mean,
fumble in Clemson. Yeah.
yeah,
I apologize. I was wrong.
we were wrong. That's fine. We admitted we were wrong. Pretty much.
Kalen's still plenty athletic, though. He did run, what, a 4.47?
Yeah, Kalen DeLoach is very fast, and I'd rather the ball go in Kalen DeLoach's hands, but I think FSU was in good hands with the whole caveat of no, not caveat, caravan of players who were following him into the end zone.
To me, Kalen's like the opposite side of Braden. We knew Braden was going to go in yesterday and have a really good day, and his measurements other than the arm length were going to be good. With Kalen, measurements aren't good. There's nothing you can do to change that. Like, you are built what you're going to be built like at 22, 23, 24 years old for the most part when it comes to the combine process. But he did well in the testing. Daniel Jeremiah, who I think is one of the best in the biz, regularly praised him for the actual on-field testing portion where they're doing, the figure eight and different stop and go drills and whatever it pertains to your position. He did well in that stuff. So I thought,
he timed well too, like the 40 and the shot.
Third
like
best 40 for a linebacker.
Had to be for him to have a chance. He's got to be like a special teams guy, right? And he can go get down.
And he's another guy. He's going to win the interview. He's going to be good on the whiteboard, and he's going to get praised by the people that worked with him at FSU. One, because he's one of the few people that stuck it out here, and two, because he is a guy that works extremely hard. He cares. He's been brought up the right way, and it shines through in the way he approaches football.
Tatum Bethune didn't do all the work correct.
I don't think he did any of the actual performance testing, but he did all of the on-field workouts. So performance testing is broad jump, vertical jump, 40, shuttle, 3-cone, things of that sort. On-field testing is more football applicable drills. So they do like figure eight or they do stop and go. For linebackers, they were doing some shuffle, side-to-side stop, catch a ball in the air. Basically different things to show what different linebackers do in the NFL. Now, linebackers not a pigeonholed position in the sense of how different teams use it. Some teams use them in very different ways, downhill versus in coverage.
But he at least did well, like some of the measurement aspects and stuff, which is good. That'll give him a chance.
Nobody showed poorly yesterday, which was really good sign. I think that praises how Mike Norvell runs his program and also how Josh Storms works with his guys.
Yeah, Fabian Lovett did well in like the positional drills.
Again, no performance testing for Lovett. I was a little surprised he did no performance testing. I guess he was worried about the 40. Maybe he just wants to run 140 on his pro day. Take that time. There are guys that have that approach. In this, like I'll be surprised. He probably will, knowing his makeup, Braden Fiske. But I'd be surprised if he ran a 40 again at FSU. Like I don't feel like he needs to. But knowing him, I mean, he literally went to do 20-yard shuttle, and he's like, I just want to sweep the board. That kind of speaks to his mindset. Like he didn't need to go do that. That's the last thing he had to do yesterday. But he's like, yeah, I'm going to go do it because I've done great at everything else. So why not?
I think he'll be in Tallahassee to cheer on his brethren at the pro day. I don't think he needs to do anymore.
Talk to teams.
Yeah, he's good. And then Jared Verse. Normally that would be the guy stealing the show if there wasn't this generational performance. But Jared Verse had himself a great day that pretty much solidifies him as a top 10 to 20 draft pick, somewhere in that range.
The only moment Verse had that he probably like to take it back on the figure eight, he kind of stuttered and stopped at one point in the middle part of it. Figure eight, basically for a defensive end edge guy, shows bend, acceleration. You're running a figure eight circle, but you want to get your body lean into that circle. When they do the body tracking, it should be your inside circle, even though your feet are actually outside the circle. And with him, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, they had to pick and drop two towels in the drill. When he got to the middle, he stuttered and there was a stall. It's just one of those moments, like you could tell he probably would have liked to do it again. But of course, NFL teams have come to a ton of FSU practices, and FSU practice does the exact same thing. Minus, I don't know if they use the towel situation, but they do the lean, the figure eight stuff. So teams have seen him do that countless times.
His 40-yard dash was sub 4.6, is 4.58 seconds with a 1.6 10-yard split. That's really good.
You got a Will Anderson comparison from Daniel Jeremiah. He's 1 pound off. They're very similar number-wise.
It's like Daniel Jeremiah was doing the comparison before they started the athletic testing, just more on build and play style. And then the athletic testing is almost like identical.
Dude's good at his job.
He's incredible. We reference him a lot because he's really good at his job. But the broad jump, vertical jump, all of it was really good for Jared Verse.
Yeah, and the thing with Verse is he's still a speed to power to speed guy, and that's the bread and butter. That's what teams are going to love. And the measurements were what you want to see, and the film's still there. Anybody that can pick up a University of Florida SEC level offensive linemen, supposedly, and throw them into another human body to create a sack, yeah, they're going to be liked. Like, that's one of those things that help you win NFL games.
So it's a great start for Florida State at the Combine. This evening, Friday evening, as we're recording this show on Friday morning, you'll have Jarian Jones and Renardo Green test. Big day for both of those guys. They're both draftable players. Renardo Green, some people are like talking about him as a potential day 2 guy. Other sides have him more as a mid to late day 3. But like, if he's someone who, if like he tests well, causes people to go back to the film, watch it over again. You see some of the metrics are going to be really good. Like, he's someone who can like make himself a lot of money based on what he does today.
Jaheim's today too, right?
Yes, Jaheim is also today. He's going to be another interesting one. And then over the weekend, we'll see Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson. Those could be fun days. And then obviously Jordan Travis is there as well. He's not expected to do anything physically. I think this is more for him getting okays with medicals and meeting with teams and kind of going from there. But point being, this has been a really good start for Florida State for the Combine. Just a couple years ago, like where this wasn't mattering at all from a Florida State perspective. Like when they do Pro Day later this month, there's going to be every NFL team represented and high-end like GMs and stuff like that that'll be there to watch some of these players. So like the program is ascending. That's what I like am interested in talking about before we move on to the next topic. I'll throw this to Zach. Like, how does this become a selling point for Florida State? How do you capitalize on what this part of the pre-draft process has been? A better question maybe is, how does Miami use it against Florida State somehow?
So many transfers. No, I mean, I think you can point to the strength and conditioning program, where Braden Fiske was ahead of his time at Florida State to where he is now. Like, how much of that it was achieved by the staff. But even for guys that have been in the program for several years, they're moving different than, all these elite players that are at the Combine. They're in the high percentiles in a lot of these categories. Like, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show what kind of development you can get at Florida State. And how, I guess for the question on how to sell that, I mean, Florida State just needs to communicate that with recruits that they're after. Show, the progress of players that have come into their program and how they left it. How they're performing athletically, and how they grow on and off the field. I mean, that's kind of a typical recruiting pitch, but now you have actual tangible results that you can show, prospective athletes that are looking into Florida State. And I think that's important. Just like we've seen kind of, when you start winning some games, you're a better product. It's easier to sell yourselves on the recruiting trail. I think, the same goes for churning out NFL talent. That's only going to help FSU's cause when it comes to recruiting in the future.
So we know recruiting involves money, so I'm going to act like that doesn't exist and making these comments. But when I talk to kids over the last 2 decades of doing this job, the number one reason really great football players in high school went to Alabama is because they believed, 1, they would win a national championship. 2, they knew they would get developed both physically, mentally, and in the strength and conditioning program. And 3, they knew they would go to the pros, get drafted high, and show well at things like the NFL Combine and be prepared for it. FSU played for an ACC championship and got screwed out of playing for an actual championship. They have 12 guys at the Combine who, on that list, I argue that at least 10 to 11 of them all drastically improved in their time at FSU, if not every single damn one. And 3, they're going to have a good time in April when the draft rolls around.
I remember Nick Saban's recruitment of Kayvon Thibodeau told him it didn't work. Like, the pitch didn't get him there, but I thought it was just like badass for him to basically tell a 5-star defensive end, it's like, listen, wherever you go, you're going to have a 25% chance of getting drafted pretty high, like, day 1 pick, just based on your profile and where guys normally go. You come here at Alabama, historically, we have a 50% chance of sending you to the first round, NFL draft in the first round. It's like, okay. But that's where you now start, like to Zach's point, Chris's point, like you have that proof of concept now that you start to sell. There will be naysayers. A lot of those guys are transfers. Okay. Does Braden Fiske get taken?
Who cares? The idea that like a transfer is a bad thing has to die. We live in a transfer portal world. A lot of kids transfer at least once, if not twice, maybe more in a collegiate career. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. It's, did you go somewhere? Did you become a better football player? Did you become better at understanding the game of football? And when you came out of that place, did it set you up for success at the next level? Who gives a, you know what, if you came from the high school ranks to the portal ranks? It doesn't matter anymore.
It should. You're saying that
schools that
logic
only win 7 games traditionally because they're crap programs, they might combat that. Who cares? If you're winning double-digit football games and competing for championships and putting yourself in position to be the best in college football, nobody's going to care about that. The only schools that can say that currently, like can get away with the argument versus what FSU is, in my opinion, are Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. And they're the 3 best recruiting programs over the last decade. Plain and simple.
By the way, Ohio State's all in on the transfer portal at this point too, because
it's the new norm. Just live with it.
If anything, like this should all make you feel really, really good about like Mike Norvell, like found this. We've talked about it for years at this point, but like now you're starting to see the fruits of that labor like materialize and like real tangible stuff. And like he saw the transfer portal as one, it was a necessity, but 2, a thing that they really liked as they got into it. And they're like, oh, we can implement culture through this. Like we're not worried about this mercenary feel. Like we can establish culture. We can get guys to come in, buy in to our program, get them in the strength and conditioning program, smooth out aspects of their game, scheme to their strengths, and have them leave more productive players than they were coming in, and win more games too, which is what the name of the game is for a head coach.
I think there's a degree of portal because a kid has been in the college game and it's more professional. You have an idea of how are they going to handle that? What are they capable of becoming within that kind of controlled system? High school recruiting is that's best football dude on the field out there every Friday night, or one of the best. He goes to camps and he's very athletic. We love his measurements and we think he's really good. And we've tried to evaluate him mentally, how he's going to handle it. But you don't know how a kid's going to handle college until they're actually in college. So I think that's a degree where FSU is very good at evaluating a portal kid and how he's going to handle it. In the high school thing, that's not going to change. I mean, the best of the best, again, a school like Alabama, for every kid Alabama has produced in the NFL draft, they produced probably pretty close to equal transfers over the years because Nick Saban understood they aren't old made for this. Some are, some aren't. And you got to trim the fat and keep bringing in the ones that are. And that's how you build a really good roster of 85.
One other thing I think, like the collective we is like people who talk about college football and as it applies to like going to the NFL and evaluating and recruiting. The idea that like the transfer portal can't yield high upside players, like that needs to go away too. And it's I know you can point to one-offs, but like, all right, Florida State this year, their first player drafted is going to be Jared Verse.
Albany.
I start with the pinky, damn it. Jared Verse. Next up is going to be probably Keon Coleman.
Michigan State.
Next up, Braden Fiske.
With Western Michigan.
Those are all going to be top 50 picks, maybe top 30 picks.
And 2 of the 3 came from non-P5 programs, including one that came from an FCS.
You can find him. Trey Benson, if he runs well, is probably going to be a top 3 or 4 round pick.
Poorly used by mediocre football coach.
And injuries. But yes. Point being, like, you can find legitimate game changers in the transfer portal, and you're not doing it consistently. You may have to pay more. Well, there may have to be more NIL opportunities involved for those players as like the market has kind of recalibrated, right? And now people see that there's this value there. But like FSU's nailed it. Like,
it's almost like it's professional sports.
Almost. All right. So speaking of us being kind of snarky about the landscape of college football, I got a thing that I have to be critical about as we transition here. NCAA is looking to change the signing period to make it 3. And when I just say that, like, that sounds good. I'm like, okay, there's some things there I think that could really make some sense. I start having issues. I guess I'm tainting the jury pool here. I'll get your guys' thoughts, though. Issues I have is when I start hearing the new dates. So they're talking about it this week. If approved, new signing periods. And my understanding is that it would be possible like this cycle. Like, so this would be impacting the next couple months here. New signing periods would be the final Wednesday in June. Damn, I started with my thumb. The final Wednesday in June. The weekend after the Wednesday after college football's regular season finale, and then the first Wednesday in February. So traditional signing period. So you'd have 3, and one of those would be in June. Thoughts, gentlemen? Discuss.
Go ahead. Zach, you start.
Yeah, I mean,
good job, Zach. You cleared your throat. No,
yeah, for me, the June one is the most alarming. It seems way too close to the official visit weekends because from what I understand, that's the Wednesday directly after the final official visit weekend. But what they're proposing, And I feel like, some of these schools coming straight off of a visit high, 4 straight visits, some of these kids might be inclined to, sign to a school. And the obvious caveat here is, with the transfer portal, I guess it's not as big of a deal for some of these guys to lock into a school early because, I mean, technically, even before you get on campus, you could request out of your national letter of intent, which we saw some guys do at Alabama this past, with Saban leaving, some of those guys that were in that class requested out. So let's say that some of these schools that I posted on Twitter, like that could capitalize off this June official visit or June signing day, would be like, some of these off-season champion schools, right? These really good recruiting staffs who, when the season rolls around, they go and win 6 games or 7 games, and they have a tough time holding on to a lot of their commits. I think some of those schools could land some elite talent, and have them sign in that signing period. And, would they be better off? Probably. Because to me, I think it's probably easier to play defense with guys that are either in your signing class or on the roster than to go and try to land elite talent when you are 4-8 in December. So that's my concern with it. And I think it kills a lot of high school evaluations for the senior year too, because if when the early signing day in December was first put in place, I don't think, at least at the start, it was pretty evenly split between both December and February where guys would sign. But now it's become almost completely December oriented, to where 99% of the class is signing in that period. Is that what June's going to become? I mean, it could. And if so, I think that's going to be dangerous, not only for, the health of high school football, because there are a lot of, seniors that might put on really good tape that fall, and maybe they haven't done anything else in their high school career, or they've been kind of steadily building, and they're not going to get the opportunity to get looked at by some of these schools that fill up their signing classes in June. And I think, honestly, like, if you think about it, if you're locking in all these guys with NLIs in June, and then they go out and, maybe they weren't the player you thought they were in their senior season, well, you're locked into those players for the time being. With obviously, the transfer portal existing, I guess it's not that big of a deal. But to me, I think it's going to only increase the amount of players that are entering the transfer portal, because a lot of these schools are going to miss on guys because they don't get that key evaluation piece of senior film. I mean, it's a huge deal when you're trying to project guys and what they're going to do at the college level. So I guess that's my kind of take on that specific day. I think so they're moving up the one are proposing to move the one up in December. I think that's going to pass, from what I've heard, from 3 weeks into December all the way up to, I think it's December 4th. It's the Wednesday
during championship week.
Yeah, the Wednesday before conference championship week. So I think that's probably fine. I'm not huge on any of the timing of it, but it probably makes the most sense, considering directly after the championship game is when the portal opens, and it's probably smart to have those completely separate and not have them going on at the same time, like we've seen in the past 2 cycles. It's not healthy for these coaches that are trying to juggle all this going on at once. So I think it's probably the smartest move, at least for the time being.
So I'm of the opinion, I don't love 3 dates, but I don't really think there's another version that works well either. I think they need to change the entire calendar. I've felt this way for a few years. I think officials should be allowed sooner. So I think the only officials allowed in January need to be guys, obviously, that can sign in February, and coaches are able to go on the road. Coaches are still going to want that time to go on the road and evaluate future classes. February, completely shut it down. Open up March, where you can start taking officials if kids want to, but they have to be academically able to. and schools have to be willing to do March, April as visits, shut down May, make it solely evaluation, or maybe April 15th to May 15th if you want to shift those dates a little bit. June is a 3-week open period for camps, officials, all of that. Shut down all of July, scrub that last week from the July calendar that currently is open and used. You run into a lot of high school kids already doing stuff with their high schools. You're going to run into, for example, with FSU this year, they're going to be prepping for Ireland and Georgia Tech that last week of July when things are open. Like scratch that week, remove it completely. If you want to create an early period, make it August 1st, but make it ironclad where outside of a coaching departure, head coach departure, a kid is locked in until they enter into the university system, and then they can enter into the portal if they so see fit. I just think you got to create something where there has to be a trade-off there for a kid to truly buy in on it. I am with Zach. I think it damages senior year. I think it damages evaluating kids over a senior year. There are kids who have great sophomore, junior years, feel like they're risers, hit the senior year and realize, oh man, they hit their ceiling a year ago. And then there's obviously the flip side of a kid that comes out of nowhere, or a kid that drastically improves, has a great senior year and becomes a very good prospect. The championship week signing day, coaches don't love it. But I don't think I can't figure out a good time to do a late season pre-January signing day that really works, because you've got the portal smashing, and the issue is the overlap of the calendars with portal and high school. The current version stinks because you're trying to deal with kids entering the portal, keeping your current football team while also recruiting future kids. And that's where they want to get rid of the overlap. And I understand doing it at beginning of December, but championship week again complicates it. For example, FSU Louisville last year would have been in some degree scrambling while also trying to prepare to play a football game that in the future will almost certainly, well, I don't know, the ACC might get, left at the door because PhD ain't doing damn thing about it, but it's supposed to have implications on you being in the playoffs and when they expand the playoffs. So like, I understand why coaches don't like that, but they do have to get rid of the overlap of transfer calendar and high school calendar. And that's what their goal is. So I don't think there's a great way to do it. I think truly there has to be, at some point, they sit down and revise the entirety of the calendar and figure out how to create times off for both coaches, recruiting kids, and for kids to just sit and think about things instead of always feeling rushed. I also don't think a signing period immediately, like that June 20 this year, 24th, 25th, after you have kids on campus on June 21st and everybody's in a rush to get them, is the best thing for kids. Because I feel like it's bad analogy, but putting a gun to their head and making them make a decision, I don't think that's a good thing. So yeah,
I think an interesting thing that's going to be different this site, like if this December 4th day does pass, the championship week signing day, what, like, do the teams that have late season home games just benefit to a crazy amount because they can host guys the week
or you're hosting a kid Wednesday to Friday before you hit the road to play a road game? Yeah.
But that's crazy to me.
That's true of any change in the calendar. There's going to be ramifications that don't work well.
And
that's why I think the entirety of the calendar has to be addressed.
But guys, that would, like, over a period of time, and there's nothing that's happening with the NCAA right now or college football landscape that seems like it's going to like last for years from now anyways. But like that would even out over a period of time. Like for Florida State, you host Florida one year, next year Florida hosts you, and like that's so that would even out, like where you'd be.
Yeah, but if you say FSU's on the road at Florida, they have a bye the week before, and they play some slappy the week before, that's going to draw a half-ass crowd because you're an 8-win football team at that point. Not FSU necessarily, but you're an 8-win football team. You're playing, Western Carolina. Sorry, Catamounts. And, it's like November 14th. Well, teams you're combating are going to have the next 2 weekends. That's what Zach's point is.
Do you know what a catamount is?
No. If you're on the road the last weekend, like,
it's in the name. It's a cat.
What do you do? I don't know. I guess for Florida State, it's always going to be on the road in Florida. But
maybe not. We'll see where
there is no current perfect fix with the way the entirety of the calendar is constructed. They have tried to put guardrails on the timing of the transfer portal, and I think that's alleviated some of it, but it's also created a short window cluster in December that this past year drove a lot of coaches absolutely berserk and was unfair to current players on football rosters, high school recruits, and coaches alike.
It's going to be interesting to see how many, like, So in December now, during the early signing period, about 80%, 85% of like high schoolers end up signing, especially like
Yeah,
the
I
upper
think
echelon.
blue chip wise, it was like 237 of the top 247
I mean,
this
so
past year. I mean, it
even
was an
more so.
absurdly high number.
So I wonder what it's going to look like in June. June's too early. That doesn't make a lot of sense to
I
me.
think it should be August 1st if you're going to do
I
a
think it
summer.
should be August
I
1st.
think you shut down July completely. Give coaches literally a month a break, everybody a break basically for a month, and allow kids to sit and think about it. And maybe you cut off all communication. Don't even allow electronic for a couple weeks or something. I know that's tough to enforce and teams won't follow it. I'm living a utopian lifestyle with that thought,
Bagman
but
will drive.
I do think there has to be some form of like, hey kid, you've collected a lot of info. Now decompress for a minute and then come back to the table and make your decision. I think that would benefit everybody. I think it would also create a situation where less kids immediately are going to transfer. Because a lot of the reason kids transfer is they have an emotional high on a visit, they commit, they end up signing, they get there and realize, oh man, the rules aren't as nice when you're not a recruit, and they don't like it and they leave. I think there's a degree of you can fix some of the problem you're having on the back end by making decisions on the front end.
I think this all benefits Florida State as currently the way this program is currently comprised.
I don't think Zach does. I think Zach's belief is
I think
that
Zach's wrong.
schools that are mediocre to poor but very good at recruiting pitches are going to win out on kids and basically
when is Florida State recruiting classes in the prep ranks usually at its best?
During the summer.
Okay.
Well, I think
okay, all right, and second,
Brendan,
wait. So,
a little bit of this.
Gather the two of them. All right, so that's first. Second, all right. When is there the most instability amongst the most chaos happening in a recruiting period with coaches leaving and when does the most shit go down?
December.
Okay. So now you speed that up a week. For a program that just re-signed its coach to $10 million a year, he's won multiple coach of the year. He's not going anywhere foreseeable future. And you're probably going to continue to win a lot of games with him. Whereas other teams are going to be firing coaches now, going to have to be doing it in early November in order to have some stability. I think it sets up well for a program that has stability like Florida State to flourish with high school recruiting in that window.
Are we talking about the June? You're talking about
June, just the way it's set up now with the June window, December window, February. I think it sets up.
I guess
well
it just to me it depends what the trend looks like of players that are signing in June if that passes.
Yeah, that is the
ultimate. If it's a high clip, because what you're not taking into account is recruiting strategy would shift. Obviously, you would try to make all out you're seeing it. I think you're seeing the ramifications of this being presented to schools as a possibility this cycle, because all of the official visits are getting scheduled in February. For
the rush to June
before.
Right now is mind-blowing.
That has never happened before. I've never seen that. And
what's funny is you guys saw that before the rule change was talked about publicly. I know it was some in the back end, but you guys were this is really weird, the amount of stuff that's already being set up, and now we probably know why.
Yeah. I mean, I was told when FSU was presented with the rule change.
So sorry, Zach.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, so it does line up. But I mean, there's a natural progression of things where the recruiting cycle is always accelerated. But I do think this has some correlation.
I've in the past always said I think basketball foreshadows what's going to happen with football recruiting wise. Sometimes a few years ago, basketball created junior official visits where they can take 5 as a junior, 5 as a senior, and they can repeat to some schools. And obviously coaching changes lie to take multiple to the same school. Do we think juniors should be taking official visits? Is that one way to fix this? But then you're just going to have reclassifications too, which we've already seen starting to permeate into football a little bit more and more.
And who knows? The early data of that shows that it doesn't work super well. So to me, I don't think that's the answer. But who knows? I mean,
is honestly, there a good answer? I'm not sure there is.
We should just predict what is the worst thing that the NCAA could do, and that's what they're going to pick to do.
I think the best thing is to turn it into a corporation and allow them to sign contracts and get rid of the whole sham of amateur athletics. But that's just me.
Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen in due time. Can we talk about FSU's amount of like how screwed over FSU gotten by the NCAA making a ruling and then like a month later, like changing it and impacting FSU, NCAA violation. Now pretty much judges said you can't enforce these NIL rules. Like a month after that, Daryl Jackson would have been great to have all last season. At the end of the season, they end up saying, "Oh yeah, we can't really enforce these."
The primo rule.
Yeah.
Why does it not? Yeah, I don't understand why the ruling in Tennessee and Virginia court where the NCAA can't crack down on NIL infractions or whatever. How does that not backlog to Florida State's?
Because Florida State worked on a negotiated settlement and accepted it before that rule became enacted. Therefore, I think they're going to stick with it. Now, to play devil's advocate on that, I think part of that is because FSU was facing a more staunch enforcement situation. They wanted to get it lessened, and that's why they went with the negotiated settlement and accepted it.
I can confirm that it wasn't initially.
But if you dragged your feet, you're probably dealing with no type of settlement.
Instead of driving a recruit, they should have just flew them by a private jet like Tennessee, right?
Rule number 1 with NCAA: do not talk to the NCAA.
True.
Level 1 violation is what they were.
Yeah,
supposed initially. All right, moving on. Zachary, you've had some travels recently. It's been a couple weeks since we've had you on the podcast. Let's talk about some Magic that you've worked and talking to. Much that you put on your Cam Newton wizardy witchy hat, and you have gone ahead and talked to some players who are very, very difficult to get a hold of. Let's discuss.
Yeah, for some reason, these two prospects are not easy to get over the phone. But I got one over the phone, Dallas Golden. He's he's a really talented player. He's a guy that Florida State has liked for a while now. When Pat Surtain got here last year, when they hosted that elite camp last summer, he was a guy that immediately stood out to Surtain and FSU's coaching staff as one of the top performers there. And that was before he had any rankings, didn't have a ton of offers, but Florida State was in the mix. And then, now, according to 24/7 Sports, he's the number 75 overall prospect in the country and the number 9 safety. So a supremely talented player. He's at a Tampa Berkeley prep, 6 foot, 176 pounds. Notre Dame is currently the crystal ball leader for him. I think that's probably right. I think Notre Dame and both them and Clemson are doing an excellent job. They both got him on campus in January for junior day visits, but he's planning to go see some more schools, and Florida State's definitely on that list of schools that he wants to go see. He told me he didn't have anything set up as far as visits go for the spring or for OVs, but he's been building a good relationship with both Surtain and defensive coordinator Adam Fuller. He's one of FSU's top corner targets. He's listed as a safety by 24/7 Sports, but he's on FSU's corner board, and they like him a lot. So would not be surprised to see him make it to campus over the next few months. And I think that's pretty important for Florida State as they look to combat Notre Dame there in Clemson. And then the next prospect.
Did you get a dog?
No, that's a dog outside that's barking. Next prospect I went to go see in person. He's a guy who's actually straight down the road from me over here in Pembroke Pines in South Florida. And he goes to West Broward High School, Joshua Moore. He goes 6'3", 205 pounds. He has an 88 grade by 24/7 Sports, but I'm told Florida State views him as one of their top receiver targets in the 2025 class. Right now, I think it's an FSU Georgia battle early. Florida's in the mix, and so is Miami, but I really do think it's FSU and Georgia at the top for him. And I probably would give the edge to Georgia, but with the caveat that they just lost their receiver coach in Brian McClendon. I think he just left for, I believe, an NFL job. And they just hired James Coley from South Carolina, which
coach.
He does a great job at recruiting South Florida.
He got called up too, huh?
Yeah, he went to South Carolina for about a cup of coffee and maybe a restroom break.
It was like the AA, the rehab. Yeah,
I was gonna say he did an introductory press conference, so I thought that was kind of fun.
They got
grand opening, grand closing.
Yeah, got pulled up from the minor leagues, but yeah. So Josh Moore, Big time target for FSU. Good relationship with Ron Dugans. Expect him back on campus this spring. And then I believe he's in the process of finalizing his Florida State official visit date. A quick note on official visits for FSU. I think for top targets and commits, they want to get them on campus for that June 21st weekend, which is the final weekend that you could host prospects in the month of June for OVs. I think that's the priority is getting those top targets on campus for that weekend. You will see some guys, mixed throughout because there has been a massive focus on just locking in OVs, regardless with a lot of these guys. And, it all depends on where you kind of stand the recruitment, on whether you're going to have the power to kind of dictate where you are on a prospect's visit schedule. But I would expect FSU to aim to try to get more on campus for that final weekend. But as of yesterday, when I talked to him, it was not finalized.
You guys want to play some Buy or Sonone?
Brought to you by the Turner Group.
Let's take a quick commercial break and we'll get back to it. Unless you're watching the YouTube video and then we're still here.
It's weird.
Welcome back to On the Bench Magic. Much like the Cam Newton app, Magic's going to be a theme throughout this episode, I think. We are going to finish off this podcast with a little Buy or Sonone. Who's it sponsored by, Chris?
The Turner Group.
Guys, where's Turner Group now? Where are they located?
Everywhere, but especially here in Tallahassee.
Yeah, Griffin Broker, which
yes.
You're not doing your business, your house selling or buying business with someone with the last name of Broker. What are you doing? What are you doing? He's an FSU grad, much like Colin and Amy Turner, and he is heading up the Tallahassee office. He has extensive background in property management, short-term rentals, and investments. Zach's family used Griffin to go ahead and broker their townhome for Tallahassee.
Yeah, Griffin's an awesome guy. I actually had dinner with him when I was up in Tallahassee last, and he's a really cool dude, super knowledgeable about the area. I would recommend him to anyone that is looking to get into the kind of Tallahassee market. I think it's a pretty good market, with all these rentals and things like that. My family, used the Turner Group to be able to explore that market as well. So I could not recommend them more.
You went to dinner with Griffin, but not to me. No, you didn't have dinner with me.
We went out to a bar.
We did go out to a bar. All right, let's start off. Buy or Sonone. We can tell. We have a magic power to tell whether a player is going to pick FSU or not just based on how their name sounds.
Well, if it's a three-name linebacker with certain measurements, then yes, we do. Buy. But in general, it's like more an or situation. Sometimes sure, other times no.
I don't like when Brendan creates the questions. Sonone.
Who said I created these? I'm just going off a prompt. Buy. I think I can tell. Go ahead, let's throw some right now. Let's go ahead and keep score. Just off the top of my head.
I mean, Primo Spears, when that name came up in the portal, it's like, yeah, that's God sending a message.
Yep.
Let me look at the target list.
Just say
Josh Petty.
Ooh.
God, I wish.
Sonone.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that
one. More of a Florida lean.
Solomon Thomas.
Bye.
Big Saul.
You better say bye. Jamie French.
Ooh, Sonone. You're not getting someone named French. Even though there's a French town in Tallahassee, it doesn't feel like it's going to happen.
Why?
Because I can tell by that. I can just feel it. I don't know.
Where's the explanation on that, though?
I just know.
He feels it in his loins.
You know how I can tell? Because I just like to picture the message board 2 years from now bitching about someone not playing, and that's how I can tell. Is this guy going to be? Are they going to be complaining why this guy is not playing over the fifth-year senior? And that's not going to happen with Jamie French. I can just tell. Are we done? This is good exercise. All right. We'll see. I'm probably going to go 3 for 3 there. Buy or Sonone. Recruiting coverage has changed and is changing the way we do it.
That's a firm buy. Yeah. I mean, February kind of proved people just don't care about the generic. He likes FSU. This is why he likes FSU. Here's my top 12. It comes with a graphic. People don't care about that. Like, people want to know basically what schools are truly in it for a kid. When will they be back on that campus? What is it going to take to secure their signature? Who are the true players in the end? and maybe they want to have some knowledge of why that player matters, which is more from the scouting department.
Yeah, I would definitely buy that. It's changing. I mean, we've talked.
What were you waiting for?
I just wanted to make sure Chris was done.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
we talked about it as a staff. I was thinking of my answer. We talked about it as a staff, and I think it's definitely important that we realize that coverage and what people, what our viewers have interest in has changed, and I think it's all warranted. It's kind of the natural progression of things, and I mean I'm excited to kind of get into a new realm of coverage, and I think our subscribers will like kind of what we've got on deck between all of us for recruiting coverage this spring and then just moving forward in general.
I was having breakfast with a buddy the other day. Let's call him B. We won't say his name. B. And he's an avid like subscriber and digest all the content.
He's avid.
Rabid and avid. And he was like, I'm having a hard time getting into recruiting right now. He's like, I'll watch videos of guys after visits just to kind of get like an idea of their vibe, their whole setup. But for him to not be interested, I was like, yeah, that's probably pretty telling. Why though? Like, is it just because FSU's gotten burnt at the end of like NSD for like the last few years? Is it because it all just changes very quickly with NIL now? And why? Because
I think both of those. I also think the snub played a role. I think the snub, there's a hangover effect to the snub. I mean, heck, people are still going after Kirk 90 days later. It's not like it's going away for many people.
The Kirk that ain't ending for ever. That's forever.
Enjoy the potatoes, Kirk.
I mean, throwing potatoes at someone.
I didn't say anything about throw them. But if you want to toss them, at me, I love potatoes. No, I think there's a degree of, I mean, I've done recruiting for 17 years now, like adamantly done it. And for like 13 of that, I really, really was like knee deep in it, no pun intended.
Chris knee deep.
And I've reached a point where like so much of it's just shenanigans, and there's always been shenanigans and BS to it, but now that a lot of it for higher end kids is a financial decision at the end, like everything leading up to that point is just window dressing. And the top 10, 12 edits for Twitter, like I could not care less. Like it's mind-blowing how little I care.
You're not going to see
what they put today doesn't matter tomorrow. So
exactly. Yeah, you're not going to see us writing a bunch of top 10 and 12 edits. Some of our national guys, I mean, that's kind of their job. They have to be covering every step of the recruiting process. But for us specifically, I think we're going to be more focused on analyzing these guys, scouting them.
When are they getting to campus?
Yeah, get what the important stuff. Because like Chris said, I mean, we kind of can do away with some of the, unnecessary.
We're not going to write a feature 48 hours before they decide where it's not about the money, and then they decide and it's all about the money.
Yeah.
Just saying.
True. We'll try not to.
Brendan's going to reflect on this one today and be like, that was an all-timer today. I enjoyed some of those moments. T-Rex arms, Miami shade.
This is my wife's mug.
All right. Buyers to Known, brought to you by Turner Group and Becky.
And Griffin
Broker. Griff Home Seller. It's German. Oh. By Orsinone, Brendan nailed the Braden Fiske evaluation.
Dude,
you were so proud.
Are all these questions just to pat yourself?
Yes, this is, dude. No, this is what happens when I don't put the prompt. It's just navel.
Sometimes you have to appease the sponsor, Zach. Just play along.
Sonone.
What? All right. Buyer Sonone, who's the king of the spring? Spring football starts in a little more than 2 weeks. We're getting pretty close to it. We'll have tour duty access in a week or so from now, so we'll get to see that. We'll have a coach luncheon. Yeah, it's all starting the next week or two. Like you're going to start getting more and more spring content. So let's set the table here. We'll end the podcast with a Buyer Sonone, who is the king of the spring.
Go ahead, Zach. You pick first.
I feel like it's always a running back, but or receiver. I'm gonna
I
go
mean, we've only done it twice, so
Tamiwa DeRoche.
Tamiwa? Okay.
Yeah, the West Virginia defensive line
I
transfer.
do think he's someone we're going to be buzzing about.
Yeah.
Everything I've heard since he got here is just the way he goes about his business is really impressive. And he's pretty special, big athlete. Shocking. FSU evaluated well with a big athlete.
I don't think we can do the running list of King of the Spring this year. I don't think we should.
I'm going to do Shaheem Brown. I think Shaheem.
He started last
I know
year.
he has started a ton, but I think he's going to elevate his role and be like. I think it's fair to say there was not questions, but some deliberation of like, is he the secondary needs the next guy?
Wasn't he like an all conference
This
player?
is an all. This is just an all-time.
Okay,
Talk
so
about all-time. This
you
is an
don't like
all-time bad one. Holy shit!
He's like, wasn't he second team all
I
ACC?
think he's going to become essentially the voice of the defense. That would be an elevation of his role and who he is.
The King of the Spring implies like a coming out of nowhere. Even Zach, I don't
coming out of
usually
nowhere.
newcomer.
You want me to go with a coming out of nowhere? I'll go with Sean Murphy then. What? He didn't play at Alabama.
He just said not a newcomer.
You guys don't know how to play King.
You're
of the
not allowed
Spring.
to
You don't know how to play
walk
Wise
into
Snow.
the
You won't let it
It's
be
kind of
all
tough
about
because
me.
like every good player, a lot of the good players. Hakeem Williams.
E.G. Uangalole.
He's a new player.
Hey, I thought about it.
I'll go Hakeem then for doing that. No, AZ Thomas.
I mean, I like Roydell Williams on offense for it and Sean Murphy.
Yeah, that was going to be my first choice if I did a running back.
But they're transfers, and you're telling me I can't do that. I also can't pick Shaheem Brown.
Oh, Fentrell Cypress.
No, he's a transfer who has been here. You're violating 2 rules at once.
I'm gonna chuck a potato at your freaking head right now. I swear to God. I don't. All right. Well,
what about yours, Brendan?
I was gonna go Hakeem Williams, so you stole mine.
Maker. So. But he had that great play against Syracuse. We know who he is.
All right. You know what? We'll do King of the Spring talk later on. We'll gather ourselves a little bit. For Chris Nee, Zach Blaustein, I'm Brendan Sinone. This has been On the Bench. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.